$200 per barrel. Say that number out loud. $200 per barrel of oil. $5 per gallon at every gas station in America, Europe tipping into recession, Japan's refineries going dark, India's economy convulsing, China's factories slowing, a global food crisis triggered by fertilizer shortages, airline tickets doubling overnight, and the entire catastrophe delivered not by a nuclear weapon, not by a ground invasion, not by any conventional act of war, but by a body of water 21 miles wide, surrounded on 3 sides by Iranian territory, patrolled by cheap Revolutionary Guard drones and speedboats that cost less than a single American Tomahawk cruise missile. Iran did not just close the Strait of Hormuz. Iran set a trap, a $100 billion trap, and the world just walked into it with its eyes wide open. Welcome. Subscribe right now, because what we're about to map out in the next several minutes is the single most consequential economic weapon ever deployed against the global order. Not a financial crisis, not a stock market crash, a choke point, a 21-mile choke point that is strangling the modern world one day at a time. Let's go. Here's the geography that makes this trap so perfectly designed. The Strait of Hormuz sits at the mouth of the Persian Gulf. Iran lies to the north, Oman to the south. At its narrowest point, 21 miles wide. Through that 21-mile gap, every single day in peacetime passes 27% of the world's maritime trade in crude oil and petroleum products, 20% of all global oil supply, 20% of all global LNG, 30% of Europe's jet fuel, 70% of China, India, Japan, and South Korea's combined oil imports. Every barrel, every tanker, every molecule of natural gas that heats European homes, powers Japanese factories, and keeps Asian economies running. One country controls both shores of that gap. That country is now at war, and that country just said, officially, on its military's official communications channels, that not 1 liter of oil will pass through that strait. Any vessel belonging to the United States, Israel, or their allies will be set ablaze. Every ship in the region heard that broadcast simultaneously on international distress frequencies, and almost every ship stopped. 150 tankers are currently anchored outside the Strait of Hormuz, not moving, not transiting, waiting. Each one carrying millions of barrels of oil that the world's refineries are screening for. And they are sitting there, engines idling, crew watching the news, because the calculation is brutally simple. The cargo is worth millions. The insurance premium to transit a closed strait under Iranian attack has exploded to levels that make the voyage economically irrational. The ship and its crew are worth more than the cargo, so the ships wait, and the oil does not flow. And every day the oil does not flow, the trap tightens. Like this video right now, because in the next few minutes, we are going to show you exactly how Iran is using 21 miles of water to hold the entire global economy hostage. Let's look at the numbers. Before February 28th, Brent crude sat at $71 per barrel. Today, it is above $100. That is a 40% increase in 15 days. And the IRGC did not stop there. A senior advisor to the IRGC commander posted on Telegram with words that moved markets the moment they landed. The strait is closed. We will attack oil pipelines. We will not allow a single drop of oil to leave the region. Oil price will reach $200 in the coming days. Get ready for oil at $200 a barrel, because the oil price depends on regional security, which you have destabilized. $200. That is not a random number. It is a calculated threshold, and the economists have confirmed exactly what it means. Oxford Economics modeled it directly. $140 per barrel sustained for 2 months is the breaking point for the world economy. At that level, the Eurozone contracts. The UK enters recession. Japan tips into contraction. The United States faces what Oxford calls an economic standstill. And Iran is currently threatening to go $40 above that breaking point. The highest oil price ever recorded in nominal terms was $147 in 2008, just before the global financial crisis. When adjusted for 2026 inflation, that peak equals approximately $211. Iran is threatening to match the inflation-adjusted record of the worst oil shock in modern history. And unlike 2008, which was driven by speculation and demand pressure, this crisis involves a total physical blockade of the world's most critical maritime chokepoint. Goldman Sachs economists were blunt about the math. In a scenario where oil flows are disrupted for a full month and crude averages $110 through March and April, they see U.S. inflation hitting 3.3% and GDP growth falling to 2.1%. They raised their recession probability by 5 percentage points to 25%. And that was the moderate scenario, not the $200 scenario, the moderate one. Share this video immediately, because what we are describing is not a future risk. It is a present reality that is getting worse by the day. Let's talk about what Iran is actually doing in the Strait right now. Since March 4th, when the IRGC officially declared the Strait closed, there have been at least 10 confirmed attacks on commercial vessels. A Thai bulk carrier engulfed in black smoke, a U.S.-flagged tanker struck twice at Bahrain's port, causing a fire. An oil tanker attacked in Iraqi territorial waters near Basra, killing one crew member, forcing the rescue of 38. A container ship struck 35 nautical miles north of Dubai. A tugboat dispatched to help a damaged vessel, struck by 2 missiles, sunk, 3 crew members missing, 2 personnel dead, 5 tankers damaged, 150 ships stranded, an oil spill threatening environmental catastrophe in Kuwaiti waters, and an IRGC sea drone striking a tanker 800 kilometers from the strait itself, demonstrating that Iran's reach extends far beyond the choke point everyone was watching. Every one of those attacks is carefully calibrated. Iran is not trying to sink every ship. Iran is trying to make the insurance calculation impossible for every ship. And it is working. For the shipping industry right now, it is impossible to go through the Strait of Hormuz. That is not dramatic commentary. That is the assessment of a professor of international relations and maritime security at the University of Copenhagen who studies exactly this. If there are no stronger signals in the near future, we are looking at a major shipping crisis that could last weeks, if not months. Weeks, if not months. With oil already at $100, imagine weeks more. Now, here's the part of this trap that nobody in Washington is explaining clearly enough: the emergency response. Because America and its allies did respond. The IEA, for only the 6th time in its history, the previous 5 being the Gulf War, Hurricane Katrina, the Libyan Civil War, and twice after Russia's Ukraine invasion, released emergency oil reserves, 400 million barrels, the largest coordinated drawdown since the agency was created in 1973. The United States added another 172 million barrels from its own strategic petroleum reserve, 572 million barrels of emergency oil flooding into the markets simultaneously. Oil prices barely moved. That is the trap. A 572 million barrel emergency release, an intervention so large it has only been attempted 5 times in 50 years, produced a temporary price decline that evaporated within hours once Iran's supreme leader issued his statement that the strait must stay closed as a tool to pressure the enemy. The market understood immediately what the statement meant. Emergency reserves are finite. Iran's geography is permanent. You cannot drain your strategic petroleum reserve forever. The United States SPR is already at historic lows after previous releases. The IEA's 400 million barrel release represents less than 2 weeks of normal strait traffic. If the strait stays closed for a month, the reserves run out before the crisis does. Iran knows this. Iran counted on this. The trap was designed with the reserves factored in. And here's the dimension that transforms this from an energy crisis into a civilizational one. The strait does not just carry oil, it carries helium from medical imaging and semiconductor manufacturing. It carries fertilizers, 50% of global urea and sulfur exports, that determine whether crops grow and whether people eat next season. It carries aluminum and steel inputs from manufacturing. It carries jet fuel for aviation. It carries LNG for heating and power generation. The World Food Program is already warning of a cascading food security crisis. Bangladesh closed its universities to conserve fuel. Pakistan declared 4-day work weeks. India's restaurants are facing an LPG supply crisis. Japan's refiners, who get 95% of their crude from Gulf states, are burning through reserves they cannot replenish. This is what it looks like when 21 miles of water closes. Not just expensive gas at the pump, the entire material foundation of modern industrial civilization suddenly running on reserves instead of supply. Trump responded to the $200 threat with characteristic bravado. If Iran does anything that stops the flow of oil in the Strait of Hormuz, they will be hit 20 times harder. He said he is thinking about taking over the strait. He said the Navy will escort ships if necessary as soon as possible. France's Macron said Europe is preparing a purely defensive escort mission for when the most intense phase ends. But the maritime law expert from Hill Dickinson law firm delivered the reality check in one sentence. The United States has no jurisdiction over the Strait of Hormuz, which is not international waters under UCLOS. Without the consent of Iran and Oman, taking over the strait would be an incursion on their sovereignty. You cannot take over sovereign territory at war with you. You cannot escort every tanker every day indefinitely. You cannot drain emergency reserves forever. You cannot bomb a 21-mile gap closed by geography. And you cannot call Iran's bluff when Iran has already demonstrated, 6 attacks in the last 3 days alone, that it is not bluffing. The trap is real. The trap is working, and the world is running out of time to find a way out of it that doesn't either collapse the global economy or require a ground invasion of Iran to physically secure both shores of a strait that 4 billion people depend on. Pete Hegseth stood at his Pentagon podium and said there's no need to worry about the Strait of Hormuz. Qatar's energy minister said if this continues, it will bring down economies of the world. The Secretary of Defense and the energy minister of the country that supplies 20% of global LNG cannot both be right. And the oil market, which is real, which is immediate, which does not lie and does not spin, has already delivered its verdict. $100 and rising, 5 tankers hit, 150 ships stranded, $200 threat on the table, and a 21-mile gap that America, with all its carriers and all its bombers and all its emergency reserves, has not been able to reopen in 15 days. That is the trap. That is the $100 billion weapon that requires no nuclear warhead, no ground army, and no technology more sophisticated than a speedboat and a drone. Just geography, just 21 miles, and the will to hold them closed until the world blinks. Drop everything you are thinking in the comments right now. Do you think oil reaches $200? Can America reopen the strait by force? Subscribe to this channel immediately. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what is really happening to the global economy right now. We'll see you in the next one.